got a section written up there, what would nature do, which is actually the next section in your workbook, some of which we will do after lunch. One of the principles like that nature works by is everything needs to be in a flow. So that's how I like to run courses, is like things are going to change and move, because if you have too many hard barriers, it just chokes up the flow, and we don't want to do that. So schedule is flexible. But we'll get through some of this now. So we talk, obviously we're using the word nature like a lot, and you may have got the idea of what I'm trying to get out of you for this question. It's a loaded question. But what do you think nature is?
Mom.
Oh. What do you define as nature? Or alternatively, what is not nature?
The city.
Why is the city not nature?
Because it's not.
It's great. What features, qualities, origins of the city mean that it's not nature?
Asphalt, cement, buildings, stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
Urban development is not nature. But also technically everything's nature because everything's made from nature. Blah, blah, blah. But it's not.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So then, are we nature?
Yeah.
So if we're nature and we create things, does it mean that what we create is nature or not?
I don't like this question. What's next?
Does anyone else want to jump in? No, you're doing great. It's exactly the line of thinking that we need to go down. Anyone else?
I think life is what makes nature nature. Whatever form of life. So this is not nature because there's no life in it. And humanity, we create, but we create things that are dead and also kill nature or kill other life forms, including ourselves. So that can't be nature. We are nature. And we also create, like when we grow pineapples or palm oil plantations, they are nature, but a different form of nature. You know, it's created nature. And what we do, it's messed around quite a lot with nature. So altering the nature of things, Yeah. But we also alter in ways that kill, like urban, really, really dead urban environments, where we kill the water, for example. Yeah.
I think that nature is alive is a really important point, which is getting into one thing that I try to bring people's attention to in this What Would Nature Do, is that the principles and the patterns of nature are, I think, important when we think about questions like this, like what is nature? So if something's alive, there's a lot of principles of living systems and qualities that they have, but including things like they're self-healing, for example. So if something, it will self-organize and self-heal. So self-organization, I guess, and self-healing may be slightly different things, but it needs to have the ability to be creating of its own and organizing itself. And that comes down to this really fundamental pattern that is the main thing I'm trying to talk about here, is generativity. So life is always trying to create more life. So if you think about what a system's doing, what are the sort of archetypal patterns of a system, life is generative, meaning that it's always creating more and more and more. And that's what we see at biodiversity as a manifestation of this. It's because life is always moving to higher levels of complexity in this generative kind of way. And it's a complexity that has a particular quality, and that is that it's ordered. So even though it's chaos and order all at the same time, because there's these principles and patterns of creation and of life that are present in everything, including in us. And this is just my personal opinion, but it's helped me in sort of thinking about it, of how as human beings we're in this fairly unique situation where we of course are nature, but because of our ability of our mind to be in this duality where we see ourselves as separate, it also means that we have the agency or the ability to act not with the patterns of nature. So we can act in a way that kills things. So we can be degenerative as well as regenerative. And it's about how are we embodying those principles of life that determine whether we're acting as in alignment with nature or we're not. So there's a point in there, a question in there about what's the difference between sustainability and generativity. And I think it's sort of relevant to, most of our work, in that we used to use the word sustainable a lot, but if you really think about what sustainable is, it's like continuing the same, when really that's not what life or what nature does. Nature's trying to be generative, trying to get to more and more higher levels of ordered complexity. And that's where I think the more that we can embody those patterns, the more that we are contributing to a generative, sustainable future. And the nice thing is, we actually see those patterns in nature, and we're like fine-tuned to respond to them. And how we know we're responding to them is that we recognize beauty. So there's something about when we see something as beautiful, and we're going to try this now, like just look around you and just stop, rest your eyes on something that you notice that you find beautiful. And ask yourself, like, what is it? Like, why do I find that beautiful? So there's another section in there called the three natures, and it's just to try to draw your attention to, I already mentioned it, but the fact that we're not just talking about outer nature, that you can't really, if you're talking about outer, what we think of normally as nature, you can't really do any real investigation into outer nature without it inherently involving inner nature, and then also true nature, this much broader, kind of transcendent quality that is nature and spirit all at the same time. So even though, I know this little talk now about patterns of creation and beauty and truth, and these all feel like very lofty kind of concepts, but ultimately it gets to the very practical side as well, like why I've called this section "What Would Nature Do?" is because it points to that there is this inherent wisdom in life. There is this intelligence in how nature orders itself and creates more life. And so we can be learning from that, which I think can happen in a cognitive way. Like we can look at, okay, so, how would nature design, really good resilient buildings? And you see the use of bamboo, and we can copy, and this is what the field of biomimicry does really well, is try to copy nature, mimic nature, because there's so much inherent intelligence in it in a very practical sense. But it becomes harder to grasp when we're talking about how do we apply those principles when it's not something physical. But I think, for example, the way that Cynthia has formed Forever Saba, there's a lot of wisdom that embodies the patterns of nature in that, like the fact that, you guys work in, small teams that relate a lot with each other, even though it has distinct functions, and there's, adaptability and constant relating with, like, the purpose of these sessions to come together, learn together, and then go back out into what you're doing. Like, all these are how nature works as well. And working with communities, like, you have to really form the relationship, and it's all about a two-way flow of communication. It's not just, some organization that knows what's right going in and telling someone what to do. It has to be, there's feedback loops and information flow all the time. So yeah, this is why we want to partner with nature, because it just kind of inherently has a wisdom. That's my point. Yeah. And then I put a quote down the bottom, which I thought sort of encapsulates all of that. We learn to do what the student of nature learns, and that was to feel beauty. So to be a student of nature, we need to be able to not just observe with our cognitive mind, but really be able to feel nature at the same time. And I believe the process goes on when we're more and more connected with nature. Those patterns just become part of us, and so that we're more able to express those patterns, so that what we create has those patterns of nature included in them. So there's a mental looking at, thinking about, then reproducing part to it, but there's also an embodied feeling, bringing in, connecting, and then producing, creating from that deeper place that sometimes even just totally bypasses our cognitive mind, and that's fine.